My mother shoved a trash bag into my arms and said, "You're old enough to survive without us." My parents abandoned me at a motel when I was 16. Last month, they sent a letter asking me to pay for my sister's wedding venue. They thought I was the same scared girl they left behind, so I set a trap and they walked right into it. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, the kind of gray, lifeless day that mirrored my worst memories. I was at my desk, the corner office I had earned with 2 decades of relentless work, finalizing a data analytics proposal worth 7 figures. My executive assistant, Lena, placed the mail on my desk with her usual efficiency, but one envelope stood out from the stack of corporate correspondence. It was cheap, thin, and off-white. The address was written in a looping, unpracticed cursive I hadn't seen in 22 years. Ms. Nancy Sterling. Not Nancy, not our daughter. A formal, cold prefix attached to a name they had no right to use. I ran my thumb over the postmark. It was from the same dead-end town I had clawed my way out of. My stomach, which had been fine moments before, clenched into a tight, cold knot. I felt a phantom chill, the same abrasive cold of a motel parking lot, the grit of asphalt under my hands. "Nancy, are you all right?" Lena asked, her voice pulling me back. "I'm fine, Lena, just a piece of junk mail." She nodded, though her eyes lingered on my face for a moment too long. "Your 3 p.m. is waiting in the conference room." "Thank you, I'll be right there." As soon as she closed the door, I took a deep, shuddering breath. I should have thrown it away. I should have fed it to the industrial shredder in the copy room and watched it turn into meaningless confetti. But I couldn't. The 16-year-old girl, the one I kept locked away, wanted to know. I slit the envelope with my silver letter opener, a tool far more expensive than anything my parents had ever owned. The paper inside was just as cheap, torn from a spiral notebook. The handwriting was my mother's, Sharon. "Dear Nancy, we hope this letter finds you well. It has been a long time. We hear you've done very well for yourself in the city, and we are so proud." I stopped, proud. The word was a slap. Proud of what? Proud of the ghost they created. Proud of the survivor they never intended to make. "Your sister Molly is getting married. It's a wonderful, joyous occasion. Her fiancé is a lovely man, and they are so happy. We are planning the wedding, but as you know, things have always been a bit tight for your father and me. We want to give Molly the day she deserves, the one we were never able to have. We found the most beautiful venue, a historic hotel downtown. It's perfect, but it is very expensive. We were thinking, since you are in such a good position, that you would love to help your family. It would be a wonderful way to reconnect with all of us. We would be so grateful if you could cover the venue cost. It's a family's duty to support one another. Let us know, we'd love to see you. Warmly, Mom and Dad." P.S. Molly is so excited to have her big sister be part of this. I read it twice, then a third time. There was no apology, no acknowledgement. "No, we are so sorry we abandoned you at the Starlight Motel on a freezing November night." Just a bill, an invoice for a life I was never part of, sent by the people who had tried to end mine. I looked at my hands, resting on the solid mahogany of my desk. They weren't the hands of a 16-year-old anymore. They weren't trembling. They were steady. My 3 p.m. meeting could wait. I picked up my phone, but I didn't call the number on the letter. I called my lawyer. I remembered that night, the sharp-edged gravel digging into my knees as I huddled behind the dumpster, the smell of grease and rain. I remembered my mother's face, impassive and bored, as she said, "You're old enough to survive without us." And my father, Simon, not even bothering to look at me as they drove away. They had forgotten one crucial thing about survivors. Sometimes we don't just survive, we thrive, and we never, ever forget. The audacity of the letter wasn't just insulting, it was an opportunity. The betrayal was no longer a wound, it was a weapon. The night they left me, The air had the metallic bite of coming snow. I was 16, all sharp angles and hollow cheeks, wearing a thin jacket that did nothing against the wind. We had been at the Starlight Motel for 3 weeks, ever since Simon lost his consulting gig, which was a nice way of saying the company he'd been scamming finally caught on. We were in the parking lot. The sun was setting, painting the sky in ugly shades of bruise purple and orange. Sharon, my mother, was smoking a cigarette, the cherry bright in the twilight. "Go get your things, Nancy," she'd said, her voice flat. I went back to the room, expecting to help load the car. Instead, I found a black trash bag on the unmade bed. Inside were 2 pairs of jeans, a few t-shirts, my toothbrush, and my tattered copy of Jane Eyre. When I came back out, Simon was in the driver's seat, engine running, staring straight ahead through the cracked windshield. Sharon took one last drag of her cigarette and flicked it onto the asphalt. "What's this?" I asked, the plastic handles of the bag cutting into my palms. "We're leaving," she said. "Okay, the car's full, I can." "No, Nancy." She didn't look at me. She looked at the peeling paint on the motel office. "We are leaving, you are not." The world tilted. The hum of the highway, the buzzing neon MOTL sign, the smell of her smoke, it all went sharp and terrifyingly clear. "What are you talking about, Mom?" She finally turned her head. Her eyes were as flat and cold as river stones. "You're 16. You're old enough to survive without us. You've been nothing but a drain, a miserable little mouth to feed. We're done." "Mom, no, please." The plea tore out of me, raw and desperate. I looked at the car. "Dad, Dad, please." Simon didn't even look at me. He just put the car in reverse. Sharon shoved the last of her things into a duffel bag on the pavement. "Don't make a scene." "Where am I supposed to go? I have nothing." "That sounds like your problem," she said. She got in the car. I ran to the driver's side, pounding on the glass. "Dad, Simon, please don't leave me." He flinched, but he still wouldn't look at me. The car pulled out of the parking space. I ran after it for a few steps, the trash bag thumping against my leg. They didn't slow down. They didn't look back. They just drove off, their taillights disappearing into the dusk. I slept behind a dumpster that night, cold, hungry, and forgotten. That was 22 years ago. Now, sitting in my office, the memory was so vivid it stole my breath. But the girl who cried behind that dumpster was gone. In her place was a woman who owned the building she was sitting in. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a haze. I went to my 3 p.m. meeting. I smiled, I negotiated, I won the contract. But part of my mind was replaying that scene in the parking lot over and over. "You're old enough to survive without us." That evening, I went home not to my sterile high-rise apartment, but to the 3-story brownstone I had bought and restored myself. Every brick, every polished floorboard was a testament to my survival. I poured a glass of water and looked at the letter again. "We'd love for you to cover the venue." It was a test, I realized. Not from them, but from the universe. Had I truly healed, or was I still that girl, hoping the car would turn around? I thought about Molly, my sister. She was only 8 when they left me, a tiny, bright-eyed thing who had been the center of their world. The golden child. She probably had no idea what really happened. They would have told her I ran away. They would have painted me as the villain, the ungrateful child who abandoned them. Their letter wasn't just about money. It was about control. It was about rewriting history, pulling me back into their dysfunctional orbit to prove that they still had power over me. To prove that, in the end, I was still the girl they could dump with the trash. They were wrong. They had forgotten one crucial thing. They forgot that I was the one who went to night school while working 2 jobs. I was the one who put myself through college, and then graduate school, graduating with honors. I was the one who built a multi-million-dollar data analytics firm from nothing but a laptop and an idea. They thought they were contacting a forgotten daughter. They had no idea they were contacting a CEO. And a CEO always reads the fine print. I picked up my phone and composed a text message to my lawyer. "Mark, I need you to draw up a document for me. It's a family matter. Let's call it an invoice. Then I did the last thing they would ever expect. I responded to the letter, not with anger, not with accusations. I sent a simple, polite email to the address scrawled at the bottom. Subject: Molly's wedding. Dear Sharon and Simon, what a wonderful surprise to hear from you after all this time. I'm delighted to hear about Molly's engagement. I would be happy to discuss the wedding. Please meet me for dinner next Friday, 7 p.m. at the Chamberlain. I will make the reservation. Best, Nancy. The Chamberlain, the most expensive, exclusive restaurant in the city. The bait was set, and I knew with absolute certainty that they would take it. The week leading up to the dinner was a masterclass in compartmentalization. By day, I was Nancy Sterling, CEO. I led board meetings, analyzed market projections, and mentored my junior analysts. I was precise, in control, and forward-thinking. But at night, the ghosts came out. I found myself digging through an old trunk, one I hadn't opened in years. Underneath my college diploma and the deed to my house, I found it, a small, faded photograph. It was the last family picture we ever took. I was 12, awkward and tall for my age, standing slightly apart from the other three. Simon had his arm draped around Sharon, who was holding a giggling, blonde-haired Molly. They were a perfect, smiling trio. And then there was me, the shadow on the edge of the frame. My entire childhood was a series of sacrifices for their comfort. I wasn't an older sister. I was an unpaid nanny. While other kids were at after-school activities, I was at home, watching Molly, cooking dinner, and cleaning the house, all while trying to finish my homework in the slivers of quiet after everyone was asleep. Molly got new clothes for school every fall. I got her hand-me-downs, 2 years too late and several sizes too small. When Molly showed a fleeting interest in ballet, Sharon and Simon scraped together money for lessons, tutus, and recital tickets. When I won the state science fair, earning a small scholarship to a summer coding camp, they told me I couldn't go. "We can't afford the gas to drive you," Simon had said, not looking up from his newspaper. "And who would watch Molly?" Sharon added, her voice sharp. "Don't be selfish, Nancy." The irony was that I loved Molly. I adored her. I would read to her for hours, hold her when she was sick. I was the one who taught her how to tie her shoes. And when they drove away from that motel, my first, agonizing thought wasn't even for myself. It was, who will take care of Molly? Now, looking at the letter, I knew the answer. No one. They hadn't raised her, they had enabled her. At 30 years old, Molly was a part-time administrative assistant, still living in their cramped, rented apartment. Her fiancé, I learned from a quick, discreet search, was equally unimpressive. A man who listed aspiring musician as his profession and had a very public, very active crowdfunding page for his next album. The people in the letter were not just my former family. They were my first antagonists. Sharon was the architect of my pain. She was a woman hollowed out by her own disappointments, who saw me not as a daughter, but as a rival for Simon's limited attention and the family's even more limited resources. She was polished in a cheap, gaudy way, all acrylic nails and harsh perfume. Her profession was unemployed, but her true calling was manipulation. She could wield guilt like a surgeon's scalpel. And Simon, my father, he was perhaps worse. He was a creature of passive malice. His consulting business was a joke, a series of failed get-rich-quick schemes that always left us poorer. He was a man defined by his inaction. His refusal to intervene, his silence, his failure to even look at me as they drove away, that was his sin. He let Sharon do the dirty work, then reaped the benefits of a life with one less burden. My email was answered in less than 10 minutes. From Sharon, loves Molly at cheapmail.com. Oh, Nancy, darling, we were so thrilled to get your email. The Chamberlain, how lovely, we wouldn't miss it for the world. Molly is so excited, she's picking out a new dress. We can't wait to see you and talk about the wedding. XOXO, Mom. The fake, gushing enthusiasm was nauseating. Molly is picking out a new dress. Of course she was. On whose dime, I wondered. The trap wasn't just the dinner. The trap was their own greed. I spent the next few days in a different kind of preparation. I met with my lawyer, Mark. He was a stoic man who had handled all my corporate contracts for a decade. He'd never seen me rattled. "Nancy, are you sure about this?" he asked, looking over the document I'd had him draft. "It's unconventional." "It's precise," I said. "I'm a data analyst, Mark. I believe in quantifiable results." The document wasn't an invoice, not really. It was a statement of account. I had spent the weekend in my home office, not with spreadsheets of market data, but with inflation calculators and old notebooks. I had itemized everything. Housing, 22 years of rent, calculated at the average rate for a one-bedroom apartment in the city. Education, full tuition for my undergraduate and graduate degrees, plus interest. Food and clothing, a conservative estimate calculated monthly for 22 years. Therapy, the most significant expense. 10 years of weekly sessions to undo the damage they had inflicted. I also included a separate, one-line item: Starlight Motel, room 112. 1 night's lodging plus damages. The final number was staggering. It was more than the cost of their dream venue. It was the cost of a life. "And this," Mark pointed to the second folder on his desk. "That's the alternative," I said. "That's Plan B." Plan B was a press release. It was a check. It was a new foundation. "You're going to walk in expecting a checkbook," I told Mark. "They're going to see a vulnerable girl they can guilt trip. They've forgotten who I am." Mark adjusted his glasses and gave me a rare, thin smile. "Well," he said, tapping the invoice with his pen, "you're certainly about to remind them." The night before the dinner, I couldn't sleep. I stood at my window, looking out at the city skyline, a skyline I had helped shape, with 2 of the buildings bearing the signature of my architectural firm, which had been a client of mine for years. I wasn't that 16-year-old girl anymore. I wasn't cold. I wasn't hungry. And I was anything but forgotten. I was the CEO of my own life. And I was, for the first time in 22 years, about to confront the people who had tried to write me out of it. The shift from victim to strategist is a quiet one. It doesn't happen with a thunderclap. It happens in the dead of night with a calculator and a search engine. My parents and sister were, to use a data term, a closed system. They lived in an echo chamber of their own making, where Sharon was a long-suffering matriarch, Simon was a misunderstood genius, and Molly was a princess. My abandonment was a sad but necessary footnote in their narrative, the story of the troubled daughter who ran off. Their request for money wasn't just audacious, it was a critical error in their data. They were operating on an assumption that I was still the girl they left, and a good analyst knows that assumptions are where you find the most leverage. My clever trap was simple. I would give them exactly what they wanted, a rich, successful daughter to brag about, and then I would use that very success to dismantle them. The dinner at the Chamberlain was the stage. My investigation was the script. I didn't hire a private investigator. I didn't need to. I built my company on finding patterns in the digital noise. People like my family are not subtle. They live lives of loud, desperate performance. I started with Simon, my father, the consultant. A few keystrokes revealed a string of failed LLCs, each one registered, dissolved, and followed by a new, equally absurd venture. Simon's Superior Solutions, Global Think Consulting, Ideavation. All were registered to the same P.O. box. He had a trail of small claims court judgments against him for unpaid debts to printers, web designers, and landlords. He wasn't a consultant. He was a con artist who wasn't even good at it. Then Sharon, my mother. Her digital footprint was all about projection. Her social media, locked down but not from a determined analyst, was a shrine to Molly. Pictures of Molly's mediocre high school plays, Molly's community college graduation, a certificate program, Molly's engagement photos, which were clearly taken by a friend with a smartphone. The captions were a masterwork of passive-aggressive entitlement. "Our sweet Molly, she deserves the world. If only we could give it to her." So proud of our girl's engagement, now to plan the wedding of her dreams. And then there was Molly, Sweet, innocent Molly, the golden child. Her social media was a public stream of consciousness, a wish list disguised as a life. She had a wedding Pinterest board with thousands of pins. The venue they wanted, it wasn't just a historic hotel. It was the historic hotel, the one that hosted celebrity weddings and political galas. The one I had attended a charity ball at just 6 months prior. The deposit alone was more than my first year's salary. Her fiancé, the musician, was even worse. He had a pending DUI charge and a GoFundMe for his tour van that had raised $85. They weren't just poor, they were fiscally reckless, entitled, and living in a fantasy world. They didn't just want me to pay, they expected me to. They had already spent the money in their heads. This information was my armor. The trap was not just the invoice I'd prepared with Mark. That was the emotional payload. The true trap was the setting. I didn't just make a reservation. I called the restaurant's general manager, a personal acquaintance. I booked the wine cellar, a private, soundproofed room in the basement. It was intimate, opulent, and most importantly, inescapable. There would be no making a scene in a public dining room. This would be a private, focused confrontation. I also arranged for a single, professional waiter to be assigned to our room. No interruptions, just impeccable, silent service that would serve to highlight the chasm between my world and theirs. And one last thing, I emailed Mark. Change of plans, don't send the documents to my office. I want you to deliver them personally, to the restaurant, at 8:30 p.m. I was calm, I was methodical. The 16-year-old girl behind the dumpster had been ruled by fear and desperation. The 38-year-old woman in the corner office was ruled by data and strategy. The night of the dinner, I didn't dress to impress. I dressed to own. I wore a simple, tailored black dress, a single strand of pearls, and the watch my board had given me when my company went public. It was a uniform of quiet, unassailable power. I arrived at the Chamberlain 20 minutes early. I sat in the wine cellar, a long, polished table in front of me, racks of priceless vintages lining the stone walls. The lighting was low and warm. I ordered a glass of sparkling water and waited. I was not nervous, I was not angry, I was prepared. This wasn't a family reunion, it was a performance review, and I was the one holding the clipboard. When I heard their voices approaching, Sharon's high-pitched, false laugh, Simon's obsequious murmuring to the hostess, Molly's nervous giggle, my heart gave a single, hard thump. The girl behind the dumpster was still there, huddled in the cold. "It's okay," I whispered to myself, straightening my spine. "I'm here now, I'll take it from here." The door opened and they walked in. The past, in all its cheap, gaudy, and desperate glory, had just walked into my present, and the trap was sprung. They didn't so much enter the room as they were consumed by it. For a moment, they just stood in the doorway, blinking at the opulence. The stone walls, the thousands of bottles of wine, the heavy, dark-wood table set for 4 with gleaming silver. It was so far removed from their world, it was like they had stepped through a portal. Sharon, my mother, was wearing a leopard print dress that was too tight and smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and cheap perfume. Simon, my father, was in a shiny, ill-fitting suit, his face slick with sweat. And Molly, my sister, was wearing a brand-new, bright pink dress, tags still visible on the inside of the collar, her eyes wide and greedy. "Nancy, darling." Sharon was the first to recover, rushing forward, her arms outstretched for a hug I had no intention of accepting. I rose from my chair, not to meet her embrace, but to establish a barrier, extending a hand instead. "Sharon, Simon, you made it." Her arms faltered, and she took my hand in a brief, awkward clasp. Her smile was painted on, but her eyes were cold, calculating. "So formal. Sharon, I'm your mother." "Are you?" I replied, my voice even and quiet. I turned to my father. "Simon." He just nodded, avoiding my eyes, running a finger under his collar. Same old Simon, 22 years, and he still couldn't look at me. And this must be Molly. I turned to my sister. She looked startled, like a deer caught in headlights. "It's been a long time. Congratulations on your engagement. Thank you, she stammered. Nancy, wow, you look amazing, this place is. Expensive, Sharon finished for her, her eyes scanning the wine bottles. You've done very well, Nancy. We are so proud. There it was again, that word, proud. Please sit, I gestured to the chairs. They scurried into their seats like children. The waiter, a consummate professional I'll call Thomas, appeared instantly, pouring water and handing out menus as thick as novels. The next few minutes were a painful, cringeworthy display. Oh my, Sharon gasped, looking at the menu. Simon, look at these prices, just for an appetizer. Well, nothing but the best for our Nancy, Simon boomed, his voice falsely jovial. She's always been a high flyer. I just watched them. I watched them mispronounce foie gras and ask Thomas if the filet came with fries. Molly, to her credit, looked mortified, but she also couldn't stop taking pictures of her menu with her phone, presumably to post later. So, Sharon said, leaning forward conspiratorially after we had ordered. Molly's wedding. It's just so wonderful, isn't it? It is, I said, sipping my water. Tell me about the venue you've chosen. This was the opening they'd been waiting for. Sharon and Molly launched into a duet of breathless, extravagant description. It was the Grand Imperial Hotel, the Cinderella Ballroom. It had crystal chandeliers, a marble staircase, and a waiting list a year long. But, Molly said, pouting, the events manager said if we can't pay the full deposit by the end of next week, we'll lose the date. And it's the only date they have this summer, Sharon interjected, placing a dramatic hand on her chest. It's just heartbreaking. We want her to have the day she deserves. I see, I kept my voice neutral. And this deposit, what's the amount? Simon, who had been silent, leaned in. This was his part. It's a bit steep, Nance, 50,000. Just for the deposit, Molly clarified. The full venue cost is 150. They all looked at me, their faces a perfect, terrible blend of hope and expectation. This was it. This was the moment they thought they had won. They thought the estranged, lonely daughter would be so desperate for a family that she would buy her way back in. I smiled, a small, tight smile that didn't reach my eyes. $150,000, I repeated. That is a significant amount. But for family, it's nothing, right? Sharon said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. I pulled my hand back slowly. Tell me, Sharon, what does family mean to you? She recoiled, her smile faltering. What kind of question is that? It means supporting each other, being there for each other, like we're doing now. Like we're doing now, I echoed, and being there, that's an interesting concept. The appetizers arrived, saving them from having to respond. But the mood had shifted. The air in the room was no longer just festive, it was brittle. You know, I said, picking up my fork, I've been thinking about that, about support, about cost. It's what I do for a living, after all. I analyze data, I calculate value. Simon laughed nervously. Well, you can't put a price on family, eh? Can't you? I met his gaze, and for the first time he didn't look away. He couldn't. I think you can. I think I've done it. Nancy, darling, you're being so strange, Sharon said, her voice taking on that familiar, sharp edge I remembered from my childhood. Just tell us, are you going to help your sister or not, after all we did for you? The words hung in the air, after all we did for you. My smile faded. What, exactly, did you do for me, Sharon? We raised you, she snapped, her mask of civility cracking. We fed you, we put a roof over your head for 16 years. Until you didn't, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a razor. Molly gasped. Simon's face went from pale to ashen. Sharon's eyes narrowed. Don't you dare bring that up. You were a difficult child, you were ungrateful. I was 16, I said. And you left me. You, Sharon, shoved a trash bag of my clothes into my arms and told me I was old enough to survive on my own. And you, Simon, you didn't even look at me. We did what we had to do. Simon's voice was a desperate squeak. We were in a tough spot. You were old enough. To sleep behind a dumpster? I asked. To figure out how to eat, how to stay warm, how to finish high school while living in a shelter. Is that what I was old enough for? Molly was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Mom, Dad, what is she talking about? You told me she ran away, you said she got in with a bad crowd and just left. There it is, I thought, the sanitized, parent-fed version. Before Sharon or Simon could spin another lie, there was a polite knock on the door. Thomas, the waiter, entered. Ms. Sterling, a Mr. Mark Jennings is here to see you. He said you were expecting him. Yes, Thomas, thank you, send him in. My parents looked at each other, confused and suddenly afraid. A man in a sharp, three-piece suit walked in, carrying a leather briefcase. Mark, I said, thank you for coming. These, I gestured to the three stunned faces, are my family. Sharon, Simon, and Molly. Mark nodded curtly, not smiling. He placed 2 folders on the table in front of me. Nancy, what is this? Sharon demanded, her voice rising to a shrill. Who is this man? This, I said, is my lawyer, and this. I picked up the first, thick folder, is the family support you were asking about. I slid it across the table. I am not, I said, my voice resonating with all the power I had earned, going to pay for your wedding venue. Instead, I've prepared this. Simon's trembling hands opened the folder. His face went white. It's an invoice, I explained, for Molly's benefit. It's a detailed, itemized bill for the cost of the life you threw away. 22 years of food, shelter, clothing, education, and therapy, all calculated with interest. It's the price of surviving on my own. You'll see the total on the last page. I believe it comes to just over $2.3 million. I expect payment in full. The silence that followed was absolute, heavier and more suffocating than the stone walls around us. The only sound was the faint crinkle of paper as Simon's disbelieving fingers fumbled with the pages of the invoice. Molly's sobs were no longer silent, they were choked, wet gasps. Mom, what is this? What is she talking about? Sharon snatched the papers from Simon. Her eyes, wide with shock, scanned the first page. She saw the line items: housing, year 1, St. Jude's Shelter for Youth. Education, public library GED program. Medical, emergency room visit, malnutrition uninsured. Therapy, 10 years weekly, undoing complex PTSD. This is a joke, she finally spat, her voice trembling with rage, not remorse. You vile girl, after all we've done. You bring a lawyer, you make up these lies. Lies? I leaned forward. Which part is a lie, Sharon? Was it the part where you drove away from the Starlight Motel? Or the part where I spent that night shivering behind a dumpster, praying a truck wow? D'ent crush me, or perhaps the lie is the data. I tapped the cover of the report. It's all in there. Inflation calculators, tuition receipts, housing market analysis. It's the cost of raising myself. Since you're so interested in family support, I thought you'd appreciate a clear, quantifiable bill. You can't be serious, Simon stammered, finding his voice. He was trying to muster some fatherly authority, but it just came out as a pathetic squeak. You can't bill your own parents. You're not my parents, I said, the words sharp and final. My parents died in a motel parking lot 22 years ago. You are just the people who signed the birth certificate. You are my first creditors. But, Molly, Sharon tried a new tactic, her voice softening, turning to her weeping daughter. Molly, baby, don't listen to her. She's just trying to ruin your big day. She's always been jealous of you. This was the moment, the golden child defense. Jealous? I let out a short, dry laugh. Jealous of what? That you got the full, undivided attention of these two, that you got to grow up in their house. Let me tell you what growing up with them means, Molly. I turned my full attention to my sister, who flinched, her tear-streaked face a mask of confusion. It means being the designated scapegoat, I said, my voice dropping. It means being the household's pressure valve. Every time Simon's consulting business failed, every time Sharon felt the world had cheated her, I was the one who paid the price. I was the miserable mouth to feed. I was the ungrateful one. I paused, letting the words sink in. The only reason you got to be the golden child is because I was the trash child. They needed someone to absorb their failure and their cruelty. That was my job. And when I got too old, too aware, too expensive to be their punching bag, they dumped me. Just like they dump everything that becomes inconvenient. Molly looked from me to her parents, her eyes begging them to deny it. "She's lying, Molly girl," Simon insisted, but his gaze was shifty. She was a troubled kid, she. She was a 16-year-old child. Mark, my lawyer, spoke for the first time. His voice was a deep, authoritative baritone that silenced Simon instantly. And the statute of limitations for child abandonment, unfortunately, has passed. But I'm sure the press would be very interested in the story. That got their attention. "Press," Sharon whispered, horrified. "He's bluffing," Simon said, but a new bead of sweat was rolling down his temple. "Am I?" I asked. "You came here tonight thinking I was your long-lost, guilt-ridden ATM. You thought you could send a letter and get $150,000 to fund your fantasy life. You, Molly, are 30 years old, and you're letting them pimp out my trauma to pay for your party." Molly's head snapped up. "That's not true. I love my fiancé. I just wanted a nice wedding." "You wanted a nice wedding you couldn't afford," I countered. "So you let them write to me. Did you even ask what happened? Did you ever, in all these years, wonder why your difficult older sister just vanished?" "They told me you ran away," she cried. "They told me you hated us." "And you believed them," I said. It wasn't an accusation, just a sad statement of fact. It was easier to believe I was the villain than to believe they were the monsters. Sharon, seeing she was losing Molly, played her last, desperate card. She stood up so fast her chair screeched on the stone floor. "I've had enough of this. This is harassment. We are leaving," she shrieked, grabbing for her purse. "You think you're so smart, Nancy, with your fancy office and your lawyer. But you're still that same cold, selfish girl you've always been. You have all this money, and you won't even help your own sister." "You're wrong," I said, standing up to face her. "I am going to help, just not her." This confused them. The anger on Sharon's face melted into bewilderment. I turned to Mark. "The second folder, please." Mark wordlessly handed me the other, slimmer folder. I held it up. "You're right about one thing, Sharon. I do have money. I have a great deal of money. And I've been looking for a worthy cause to make a significant philanthropic donation to." I opened the folder and pulled out 2 documents. The first was a cashier's check. "This is a check for $150,000, I said. A flicker of grotesque, desperate hope flashed in their eyes. Simon even took a half step forward. "It is made out," I continued, "to the Metro Youth Shelter Network, the very organization that took me in when I had nowhere else to go. It will fund their Nancy Sterling wing, providing food, shelter, and educational resources for other kids who were old enough to survive." I then held up the second document. "And this is the press release my PR team will be sending out tomorrow morning announcing the donation. It tells my story, our story. About how the CEO of a major firm was once a homeless teen, abandoned by her family. By you." The blood drained from Sharon's face. Simon looked like he was going to be sick. "You wouldn't," Sharon breathed, her voice a papery-thin threat. "Watch me," I said. "You wanted my money, you wanted to be reconnected. Well, congratulations, you are now part of my brand. You are the origin story of my philanthropy." I placed the press release on the table. I looked at Molly, whose face was a blank mask of shock, the tears frozen on her cheeks. "Molly," I said, and my voice softened just for a moment. This is who they are. This is what they did. What you do with that information now, that's up to you. You can stay with them in their fantasy, or you can start your own life. But my checkbook is closed." I gathered my purse. Mark gathered his briefcase. "Oh," I said, pausing at the door, "one last thing." I gestured to the half-eaten, expensive plates of food. the open bottle of wine they'd ordered. The reservation was in my name, but the dinner is all yours. Thomas, I said to the waiter who had materialized by the door, please present the bill to my father. And with that, I walked out. Mark followed me. As the heavy door swung shut, the last thing I heard was the beginning of a truly spectacular, shrill scream from Sharon. The trap hadn't just sprung, it had vaporized them. Walking out of that private dining room was like surfacing for air after being underwater for 22 years. The air in the main restaurant was bright, filled with the civilized clinking of glasses and low, happy murmurs. I didn't look back. Mark and I walked in silence through the lobby, past the bowing doorman, and out into the cool, clear night air. The city street was alive, humming with taxis and people. I took a deep, clean breath. It was over. Are you all right, Miss Sterling? Mark asked, his professional demeanor softened by a genuine concern. I am Mark, I said, and I was surprised to find it was the absolute truth. I felt light. Thank you for your help tonight. You were perfect. My pleasure, he said with a small smile. That was, without a doubt, the most satisfying billable hour of my career. The press release will go out at 9 a.m. sharp. Excellent. Good night, Mark. Good night, Nancy. He hailed a cab and was gone. I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, just letting the city wash over me. I wasn't cold. I wasn't hungry. And I was not, in any sense of the word, forgot. I had intended to go straight home. But as my own car service pulled up, the restaurant's heavy oak doors burst open behind me. Nancy, wait, please. I turned. It was Molly. She ran toward me, stumbling in her new, too-high heels. Her face was a wreck of running makeup, her breath coming in sobs. She stopped a few feet away, clutching her purse, looking like a lost child. What is it, Molly? I asked. My voice was not unkind, but it was firm. Is it true? She wept, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. Everything you said, the motel, the dumpster. Yes, I said, every word. They're still in there, she hiccuped, gesturing back at the restaurant. They're screaming. Mom is screaming at Dad. His card was declined. The manager is there. It's horrible. A small, cold part of me felt a flicker of grim satisfaction, but it was quickly replaced by a profound sadness. This was her family. This was the wreckage. They don't have any money, do they? She whispered, the horrifying, adult realization dawning on her 30-year-old face. They never did, the whole wedding. It was all dependent on you. Yes, I said again. She stood there, vibrating with a toxic cocktail of shame, fury, and grief. All my life, they told me you were the bad one, the selfish one, the one who broke Mom's heart. And what do you believe now, Molly? She looked down at the pavement, then up at me, her eyes finally clear. I believe you. She took a shaky breath. My fiancé, he's part of it, he was in on it. He's the one who found your office address online. He kept saying, your sister owes us, she owes you. He's probably right outside in a car, waiting to hear how much money you got, I said. She nodded miserably. He is. A profound silence settled between us, two sisters separated by a lifetime of lies, standing on a city sidewalk. So what now? I asked. Are you going back in there? Are you going to go home with them and pretend none of this happened? I can't, she whispered. I can't go back in there, but I have nowhere else to go. I have $22 in my bank account. My cell phone is on their plan. I looked at her, the golden child, the princess. She was just as much a victim of their dysfunction as I was, just in a different, more insidious way. They hadn't thrown her away, they had crippled her, made so dependent she could never leave. The 16-year-old girl behind the dumpster, the one who had once adored her baby sister, made a decision. Get in the car, I said, as my driver held the door. Molly looked at me stunned. What? Get in the car. I'll pay for a hotel for you for a few nights. You're 30 years old, Molly. It's time you started surviving on your own, but you don't have to start behind a dumpster. She didn't move, She just stared at me, her mouth open. "I'm not them, Molly," I said gently. "I'm not going to leave you on the street, but I'm also not going to pay for your wedding. This is a one-time offer, a fresh start. You can take it or you can go back to them. Your choice." For a second, I thought she would turn back to the restaurant, back to the familiar, toxic comfort of her parents. Then she did something that shocked me. She took her cell phone out of her purse. She looked at the screen, where I could see Fiancé 3 calling her repeatedly. Then she looked at the restaurant, where I could see Simon and Sharon's silhouettes arguing with the manager through the glass. With a final, decisive click, she powered the phone off. She dropped it back in her purse. "Okay," she said, her voice small but resolute. "Okay." She walked past me and got into the back of my car. I got in beside her. I didn't look at the restaurant. I didn't look at the past. I looked straight ahead. "Where to, Miss Sterling?" my driver asked. "The Intercontinental, James, and then home." As the car pulled smoothly into traffic, Molly sat in silence, twisting her fake engagement ring around and around her finger. Finally, she slipped it off and dropped it into her purse, right next to the dead phone. She didn't cry. She just looked out the window at the city lights, as if seeing them for the very first time. I didn't know if we would ever be sisters. I didn't know if I could ever undo 22 years of lies. But as we drove away, leaving our parents to face the bill for a dinner they couldn't afford, I felt a sense of peace. Justice had been served. The books were finally, definitively balanced. The next morning, the press release hit the 9 a.m. wire just as Mark had promised. It was perfect. It was picked up by the local news, the business journals, and even a few national human interest blogs. The headline was, "From Homeless to CEO. Nancy Sterling donates $150,000 to youth shelters that saved her." The story, as I had dictated it, was tactful but firm. It spoke of a difficult childhood and being forced out on her own at 16 due to untenable family circumstances. It didn't name Sharon or Simon, but it didn't have to. The message was clear. It reframed my narrative from one of shame and secrecy to one of strength and philanthropy. My phone was flooded with messages of support from friends, colleagues, and board members, all praising my bravery and generosity. The donation, it turned out, was the best PR my company had ever had. I spent the day in a series of meetings, feeling more focused and powerful than I had in my entire life. The shadow that had followed me for 2 decades was finally gone, exposed to the light. I didn't hear from Sharon or Simon. Their public humiliation was, I assumed, total. They were trapped. If they confirmed the story, they were monsters. If they denied it, they were liars and monsters, fighting against a beloved local philanthropist. My invoice had been a personal confrontation. The press release was a public checkmate. Their social network, the one they had curated with their lies about Molly's dream wedding, would evaporate. Late that afternoon, I received a short, formal email from a law firm. It was from Molly's ex-fiancé. He was threatening to sue me for emotional distress and alienation of affection. I forwarded it to Mark with a one-word note: "Handle this." I knew I'd never hear from him again. When I got home that evening, there was a message on my private line from Molly. I had set her up in a comfortable hotel suite, paid for 1 week, and given her a prepaid debit card with enough money for food and a new phone. I had also given her the card of a therapist I trusted. The rest was up to her. "Hi, Nancy." Her voice was small but steady. I saw the news about the donation. It's amazing what you did. I wanted to say thank you for last night for not being like them." She paused. "I called that therapist you recommended. I have an appointment for tomorrow, and I'm looking for a job, a real one. I wanted you to know, thank you." That was all. It wasn't a request for more money. It wasn't a plea for a relationship. It was just a simple, grateful acknowledgement. It was a start. A month later, the Metro Youth Shelter Network held a small ceremony to officially dedicate the Nancy Sterling wing. I stood at a podium in a brightly lit, renovated common room, a room. That was safe and warm and clean. I saw a young woman I didn't recognize standing at the back of the crowd. It was Molly. She looked different. Her hair was a natural brown, no longer the harsh blonde. She was wearing a simple, professional blouse and slacks. She looked thinner and older, but her eyes were clear. She had a new job, she'd told me in a brief email, as a receptionist at a dental office. She was in her own small apartment. She was, for the first time in her life, standing on her own feet. When my speech was over, she didn't rush up. She just waited until the crowd thinned. "Hi," she said. "Hi, Molly, I'm glad you came." "It's really great. What you're doing," she said, looking around the room at the new computers and comfortable-looking cots. "These kids, they're lucky to have you." "I was one of them," I said simply. An awkward silence fell, but it wasn't hostile. It was just new. "Listen," she said, digging in her purse. I wanted to give you this." She pulled out a crumpled envelope. Inside was a small amount of cash. "It's not much, it's my first paycheck, but I wanted to pay you back for the hotel. I'll pay back all of it, I promise. It'll just take me a while." I looked at the money, then at her determined, earnest face. I gently pushed her hand back. "Keep it," I said. "That wasn't a loan, Molly. It was an investment. Just pay it forward." Her eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them back. "Okay." She looked at me, really looked at me, for what felt like the first time. They tried to call me from a blocked number I didn't pick up. I don't think I'll ever be able to. You know. "I know," I said, "and that's okay. You don't owe them anything." "I know that now," she said. She gave me a small, shy smile. I'm having coffee with a girl from my therapy group on Sunday, but maybe sometime after that, could I text you?" The 16-year-old girl, the one who used to read her baby sister to sleep, smiled. "I'd like that, Molly. I'd like that a lot."